All right, let's get into the story. Today, we're talking about Allen Stanford. You might have seen him on TV, this big, charismatic Texan promising amazing returns on your investments. He built a massive global financial empire. But the whole thing was a lie, a multi-billion-dollar lie.
This quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? This wasn't just some dodgy business deal. Everything about him was a performance. His family history, the very bank he ran, it was all an elaborate fiction designed for one reason and one reason only, to take people's money. So just how big are we talking? The fraud was worth over $7 billion. That makes it one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history, right behind Bernie Madoff. But Stanford's story is something else, a really unique, brazen tale of pure ego and deception. And behind that unbelievable number, that's where the real tragedy is. 21,000 victims. These are real people who handed over their life savings, their retirement funds, their kids' college money, all of it, only to see it completely disappear. To really get how he pulled this off, you have to understand the character he created for himself. Stanford wasn't your typical, quiet, white-collar criminal. Oh no, he was this larger-than-life personality who built his own little kingdom, styling himself as a billionaire pirate of the Caribbean. So here you've got the myth versus the reality. He sold the world this image of a brilliant financial mind from a long line of respectable bankers. But the people who actually knew him, they saw something very different. A classic, smooth-talking Texan who knew how to sell anything to anyone. He was the perfect salesman for a product that didn't even exist.
But this master of deception didn't actually start out in finance. His story begins in a completely different business, one that ended in a spectacular failure that really set the stage for the massive crime that was to come.
Believe it or not, back in the 70s, Stanford was a fitness king. He had this chain of high-end gyms and was known for literally arriving in a helicopter. But like a lot of people who get a taste of success, he got greedy. He expanded way too fast, right as an economic crisis hit, and his entire empire just collapsed, leaving him with a $13.6 million personal bankruptcy. His first big shot ended in total ruin. And this quote right here, it shows you just how far he fell. Someone who knew him back then remembers seeing the former fitness mogul, the guy with the helicopter, flipping burgers in a small town. It was from that point, from rock bottom, that he decided he was going to rebuild his fortune. Only this time, he wasn't going to play by any rules.
So after his bankruptcy, Stanford heads to the Caribbean and discovers the world of offshore banking. And he has this realization: you don't actually need a real, profitable business if you can just find a place with no rules where you can make it all up.
And the crime at the heart of his new empire was a classic Ponzi scheme. It's pretty simple, really. You promise big returns to your first investors, but instead of earning that money, you just pay them off with cash you get from new investors. As long as you keep bringing in more new money, you can keep the illusion going.
So here's how his specific method worked. First, he sold something that looked super safe, certificates of deposit, or CDs, and he offered returns that were just a little bit better than the banks. Just enough to be tempting, but not so high that it looked suspicious. In reality, he barely invested any of the money. He just pocketed most of it, used a little bit of the new cash to pay anyone who wanted to withdraw, and then sent out fake statements that made it look like everyone was getting rich.
His first attempt at an offshore bank was in a place called Montserrat, but they found out about his bankruptcy and kicked him out. So he needed a new playground. And boy, did he find the perfect one: Antigua, a country known at the time for corruption and for basically welcoming criminals. There, he could bribe whoever he needed to and operate with zero oversight.
So with a constant river of stolen money pouring in and absolutely no one to stop him, Stanford started to live a life of just unbelievable luxury. He wasn't just rich, he acted like he was a king.
And in Antigua, he basically built his own kingdom. He became the second biggest employer on the entire island. He owned the airline, the main bank, even the newspaper, which he used for his own propaganda. He got so powerful that the government of Antigua actually knighted him. I'm not kidding. He insisted people call him Sir Allen Stanford. And his personal spending was just obscene. To give you a perfect example of his ego, he already owned a luxury yacht, but he decided it wasn't quite long enough. So he spent over $100 million not to buy a bigger yacht, but to have his current one cut in half and extended by 10 feet. It was all about showing that he could do literally anything you wanted. And to prop up this entire fantasy, he just completely made up a family history. He told this story over and over again about how his grandfather started a financial company during the Great Depression, trying to create this legacy of trust and stability. The truth? His dad was the mayor of a small town in Texas.
The whole backstory was a lie to make investors feel safe.
For more than 20 years, this scam just kept getting bigger and bigger. But we all know how these things end. It was a house of cards, and it was only a matter of time before something came along and blew it all down.
The beginning of the end came in 2008 with the global financial crisis. Then, a few months later, Bernie Madoff gets exposed. And suddenly, everybody's spooked. Stanford's investors panicked and rushed to pull their money out. But of course, the money wasn't there. For the first time, more money was going out than was coming in, and the whole thing imploded. On February 17, 2009, federal agents raided his offices.
And when the feds finally got a look at the books, here's what they found. The bank claimed it had $8.5 billion in assets. The reality? They had only $20 million. Almost every single dollar was just gone, spent, stolen, or vaporized to keep the lie alive. With the lie exposed and Stanford in custody, the story now turns to the devastating real-world consequences for the thousands of people who had put their trust in him.
In 2012, Allen Stanford was convicted on 13 counts of fraud, conspiracy, you name it. The judge sentenced him to 110 years in federal prison. He is never, ever getting out.
But for his victims, justice has been, well, it's been almost non-existent. So far, for every single dollar they lost, they have received just 1 cent back. For most of them, that means their entire life savings have been wiped out, forever.
The consequences have been catastrophic. People lost their homes. They couldn't afford to buy food or pay for life-saving surgeries. Some people, after a lifetime of hard work, literally died from the heart-wrenching stress and shock of losing everything they had. This wasn't just a financial crime. It destroyed thousands of lives.
And that really brings us to the final, chilling question. Allen Stanford's story is a terrifying reminder of how powerful charisma and greed can be. In a world where everyone is always looking for an edge, for that slightly better return, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Who's out there right now building the next great lie?